Question for George Brandis. My brother Julian Assange has spent the last 3 years in a UK maximum security prison fighting extradition to the US, where he faces a potential prison sentence of 175 years. Recently, he suffered a mini-stroke, the prison conditions and legal process taking its toll on his mind and body. Prime Minister Anthony Albanese has said enough is enough, but Julian remains in jail. A recent SMH poll showed that 71% of Australians agreed with the statement that Julian should be brought home. All the major press freedom and human rights organisations have called on the Biden administration to drop the charges against Julian. As a former UK High Commissioner and former Attorney General, how would you go about carrying out the wishes of the Australian people and the Prime Minister and ending Julian's imprisonment?
George Brandis.
Well, it's not up to us to end Julian Assange's imprisonment because he is being the subject of a prosecution by the United States for a breach of American law. And the proceedings in London at the moment are extradition proceedings between the United States and Julian Assange. Australia is not a party to those proceedings. Australia wouldn't have the legal standing to be a party to those proceedings, nor should we be interfering with judicial proceedings. To do that would be to interfere with the course of justice.
But it was a decision of the Home Secretary in the UK to approve the extradition. Did you, as High Commissioner, make any representation?
I did not. I did not.
It's
the Australian government. It certainly was the Australian government's view that the legal proceedings and the extradition proceedings should run their course, and at no point did we seek to interfere with that process. Now, what we did do, though, is we gave Julian Assange exactly the same treatment and support that any Australian citizen in the UK would receive, the same consular support. In fact, I instructed the consular people at the Australian High Commission to make sure that every month we wrote to Julian Assange to ask him if there was anything he needed by way of assistance and support in a consular sense. And at no time did he say that he wasn't receiving the consular support he needed. But
well,
of course, what he did say was that he wanted the Australian government to interfere with the process in the UK court between him and the United States.
Or the decision of the politician, the Home Secretary, Kylie, Moore-Gilbert.
I mean,
how much sympathy do you have for Julian Assange's situation?
I, of course, have sympathy for Julian Assange's situation. And, I mean, I think I disagree with a few points that George Brandis just made. The first being this isn't a regular consular case. This isn't an Aussie in Bali who's had too much to drink and fallen off their scooter or something, you know. This is a political case. It's inherently political. And Julian Assange, like him or loathe him, is a political prisoner.
No, I don't agree with that. I do not agree with that, and I don't have any personal feeling one way or another about Julian Assange. He's been charged with
espionage by the United States.
Yeah, which is a very serious crime.
Sure, but WikiLeaks is many things. Do you believe it's an espionage outfit?
I think that's a decision for a United States court to make.
Did Julian Assange commit a crime on US soil? Do they have universal jurisdiction over Julian Assange?
That is a decision for a United States court to make. But
the definition of espionage is on behalf of a foreign country or a foreign body. Is WikiLeaks, do they fit that definition, or do they more fit the definition of a publisher?
That very argument was put before the British judge, before whom the extradition proceedings was brought and dismissed.
So you don't think that he deserves any intervention whatsoever by us, being his country of citizenship?
I believe that
as a political prisoner.
I don't believe he's a political prisoner. I believe Julian Assange is entitled to exactly the same treatment as any Australian in trouble ought to receive from the Australian government by way of consular assistance. And I think we ought to respect the integrity of both the judicial processes of the United Kingdom and the integrity of the United States criminal justice system.
Peter, let me just bring in Peter here, because, Peter, I'm keen for your perspective on this. Pre-politics, you were in Iraq for quite some time as a security advisor during the Iraq War to the provisional government there. What did you make of this sort of, you know, the WikiLeaks classified information being released? And how have you now come to the view, as you have over the last year or so, that you actually think these espionage charges should be dropped?
Yeah, well, to be clear, David, I'm a member of the Parliamentary Friends to bring Julian Assange home. It's a cross-party membership, all major parties, independents, Labor, Liberal, Greens and so on. And we've made representations to the President, US President, to drop the charges and the DOJ to drop the charges. So let's be clear, and I want to be open about this. I've been in quite a bit of touch with Gabriel, Julian's brother, around the legal case that he's going through, that George sort of stepped out. So there is the legal case, there is the appeal process that are ongoing there. But there's also the other element of this. And Prime Minister Albanese has said that, this case has gone on long enough and it needs to be brought to a close. There is quiet diplomacy. And when he was asked the question, he said, not all diplomacy is done with a loud hailer. There is something to be said for quiet diplomacy. The points that you ask about with respect to whether Julian Assange or not, you can argue the merits of whether he is, investigative journalist and whether the dump of material, which wasn't redacted like the Pentagon Papers and others, was good journalism or not. The point, there's a matter of principle here at stake, and liberal democracies like ours have to match our rhetoric on the freedom of the press with real action and backing that up. And for me, that is a fundamental principle, given that we've just been talking about the rise of authoritarian regimes around the world and their threat to press freedom and to journalists doing their work. But I want to say too that there are many other Australians who are arbitrarily detained overseas, and we need to pay attention to their cases, whether it's Cheng Li, Dr. Yang in China, which the Foreign Minister Wong has raised with her counterpart in their recent meeting, which was the first, by the way, in 3 years, whether it's Sean Turnell in Myanmar, whether it's Robert Pether, who is in a prison in Iraq, and I've been doing some work around that. So these are important matters, and we need to do everything we can to help those Australians be released, like what happened with Kylie.
Well, let me ask you, Kylie, because you've just written a powerful book about your own experience imprisoned in Iran. And we're just talking about Julian Assange, and we know that his physical and mental well-being is absolutely suffering as a result of what's going on there. You were, 804 days in prison. How on earth did you cope with that?
I mean, the book is about that subject, essentially. You don't cope. I mean, this is one of my primary concerns about Julian Assange, is the prison conditions that he is being kept in Belmarsh prison in the UK. This isn't Iran. This isn't Iraq, where poor Robert Pether is currently rotting away under fears right now of suffering from cancer. This is the United Kingdom. Why does he have to be kept in a maximum security prison, largely in solitary confinement? He did suffer a mini stroke, as Gabriel mentioned. I don't understand why somebody who's clearly not at risk of committing violence or endangering the UK public at all should be kept alongside criminals, murderers, terrorists in a maximum security prison. There's that, and I mean the initial court ruling in the UK was very much about that, about the impact on his mental and physical health, given those prison conditions and the limbo that he's been subjected to. An uncertain, unclear amount of time in prison with no end date. That is a form of psychological torture.
But the reason that there is not a finite end date is because there is a process underway, and he, as he's entitled to do, is appealing each decision until the appeal process exhausts itself. And in the meantime, because he's a flight risk,
Why would he be a flight risk from a low security prison? A low security prison, how is he a flight risk?
There has never been a complaint that I'm aware of that the nature of the prison has contributed to his mental or physical well-being.
I can tell you 100% it would have.
Well,
you are locked in a cell 23 to 24 hours a day on your own. You don't think, for days and days, he's been there for 3 years, you don't think that's going to have an impact on his mental health?
He hasn't been in solitary confinement for 3 years.
For a large period of time he has, and he's been diagnosed with a number of mental health illnesses as a result directly of the prison conditions.
Which is why I insisted that we constantly inquire to ensure that his mental and physical health...
Why didn't you request he be removed to a prison that is less harsh, where he's not being kept in the conditions that terrorists are being subjected to?
Australia respects the criminal justice system of the United Kingdom. we do.
You can make requests diplomatically. When I was in prison in Iran, the Australian embassy made repeated requests that I be removed out of a higher security solitary confinement ward to a kinder, more open, more free ward. That is entirely possible in your remit as a diplomat.
But surely you're not making a comparison between the UK prison system and the Iranian prison system.
Well, George Brandis, that is a very valid question, though. Why is it okay to make that request in one jurisdiction and not another?
Because we were satisfied that the way in which the UK prison system was treating Mr Assange was appropriate in the circumstances. By asking him to articulate any complaints that he had to us, so that if appropriate, we could make an intervention.
But in court, he in court said that he is a suicide risk, and the initial court in the UK ruled on mental health grounds due to fears about his treatment in prison in the United States should he be extradited there.
But that's not the United Kingdom.
It's a current mental health assessment given his current conditions in Belmarsh prison.
Not to complicate matters, I'm sorry, but you're discussing the UK legal process and the prison system and so on. The Obama administration actually dropped charges against Chelsea Manning and provided clemency. The Trump administration doubled down on Julian Assange, right? So we are hoping that the Biden administration would look at his case in the same way as they looked at Chelsea Manning. But we haven't even got to the US system yet. So I just want to make
Peter, if President Biden decides, or the Attorney General of the United States decides to drop the charges, that will be a matter for the United States. But
we can ask them to,
but Australia,
diplomatically.
Australia respects the integrity of the United States criminal justice system, and we respect the integrity of the United Kingdom criminal justice system.
It doesn't mean we cannot ask them.